Hi, it's Dave. So today we've got a new channel coming up, and it's called 100x Parenting by Dave Lee, or Dave Lee on parenting. I might change the channel name. In fact, I wasn't really planning on releasing a new channel or starting a new channel at this time, but I'll tell you the story of how this channel kind of came about. But I also want to introduce some of my ideas and thoughts on parenting and how we can rethink the entire parenting model from scratch, from first principles. Um, so, yeah, I was telling my son how I thought that other kids could be helped who would be scared about pulling teeth if he could share his own story, because my 6-year-old son, he was very scared of pulling his own teeth or his own tooth. And I kind of encouraged him. I'm like, yeah, it's up to you. You could pull your own tooth or I could do it, but there's pros and cons. And we talked about the pros and cons of him pulling his own tooth versus me pulling his tooth. And we talked about it for about a week or so. After a week, he got convinced. He wanted to pull his own tooth. He saw the benefits of doing that. And the benefits he thought were he could pull the rest of his tooth and he wouldn't be as dependent, let's say, on me to pull his teeth. And as he got convinced, I'm like, yeah, let's video record it. So if you pull your tooth, then other kids can kind of feel more courage, or they could see an example, right, of someone pulling their tooth. And we watched some YouTube videos, but we weren't able to find a 6-year-old who was pulling their first tooth, right? We saw some older kids pulling their teeth, but we didn't see a 6-year-old pulling their first tooth. So I said, yeah, I haven't seen that around, so let's just record it and see what happens. So he pulls his tooth. I have it on video. I'm gonna kind of edit it and put it on this channel. And he was just shocked when he pulled his tooth. He's like, oh my gosh. And then he cried like for 10 seconds, and he came back and he was mesmerized by his tooth. And so for his second tooth this week, this was a couple weeks ago, and then for his second tooth this week, I'm like, okay, when you're ready to pull it, I want to take a video so at least we could put it together with the other video. And he's like, oh, I want to do a live stream. I'm like, what are you talking about? How do you even know what a live stream is, right? And he was just like curious what a live stream was. I'm like, yeah, that's where people watch the video as you record the video. And so he's like, yeah, I want to try that. And I'm like, why? He's like, yeah, maybe, I could help people or something. Maybe, other kids can watch it later. And so that was the context. And so today, I didn't have a channel set up for parenting, even though it's something I've been wanting to get to eventually. And my big question was, should I do it within my other channel, which is an investing mostly, or should I, create something else? So my son wanted to try to pull his tooth, so I just quickly, created something and said, okay, let's try it, and let's do a live stream. But I realized no one's going to watch it. So I said, okay, maybe I'll tweet out a link to the live stream and maybe some people will watch it. And then my son would try to pull his tooth. So we just did that just about an hour ago. And I had a fun time. My son ended up not pulling his tooth because it wasn't quite ready. But yeah, I was encouraged because he, stuck it out. And I was also encouraged by the people who were responding to the video, but also my tweet, asking questions about parenting, because my approach to parenting is kind of out of the box and it's quite radical. It's extreme in some ways, and it really is something that I haven't heard many people. Actually, there's really no books or people or blogs or channels I go to personally for parenting, just because it's something that I've worked on for, even before my kids were born, to come up with my own approach and own model. And sure, I probably borrowed pieces here from different pieces from other books or things I've read, but bringing it all together, it's something that I wanted to share because I haven't really seen this type of model or approach taken elsewhere. So in this first video, what I want to do is I want to share the background of my parenting approach. And I want to share kind of the essence of what I think is parenting redone. And it all starts with kind of how to unlearn everything that I personally learned about parenting and then rebuilding the whole idea of parenting from scratch. So this is a live stream. If you're on watching, feel free to ask a question. I'm going to go ahead and look and monitor at the comments as well. All right, so I'll talk about a few points. Number one, for me myself, I grew up with a very poor parenting model. And I think for anyone who has kind of poor parenting models, or let's say sub-ideal parenting models, I think it's important to examine that. And that's something that needs to be dealt with. For me personally, my parents were extremely poor models. They were probably on a very extreme. My parents, my dad was abusive, physically, emotionally. We had a lot of fear growing up in my house, or when I was a kid. I was constantly scared of being not just hit, but being, basically beaten. And not just with that, there was a lot of shame involved in our family and a lot of instability. And it was such a traumatic experience growing up in just an abusive household that it took me many, many years to even want to have kids, because I just looked at that and I'm like, this is just a terrible, terrible environment for anyone. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. After a long time, I eventually started to think about parenting, and this was, all throughout my 20s. I'm like, I just, the idea of having kids, it was just, I couldn't handle it. It just, my past was just too vivid and too, the wounds were too real and open at that time. Over time, I was able to heal from my past. It took me almost a decade in my 20s to focus on a lot of inner healing and a lot of just self-work and reinterpreting my past and finding a place of wholeness. But after that, I started to ask that question, like, okay, could I have kids? And if I could have kids, can I do it better than what my parents did? Not just a little bit, but what is that experience that I would want for, let's say, potential kids? So here's another thing is, when I saw my friends, so I had friends that were getting married, and I got married when I was probably 33 or so, but I had friends that had gotten married in their early 20s and mid 20s and late 20s. And when I saw my friends have kids of their own, their kids, generally speaking, tended to be out of control. And my friends, like, their attitude about parenting, they just weren't loving it. They weren't enjoying it. It wasn't the best experience of their life. And I looked at that, I'm like, there's something off about this. And I couldn't find a single friend or a single acquaintance where the parents were just ecstatic about how amazing the parenting experience was. And the kids were just amazing in terms of how they related with each other, but also with their parents and others. I just couldn't find any kind of model for that at all. It was like just non-existent. What I saw instead were a lot of my friends and acquaintances trying to get by, trying to survive, trying to like tread water. And there was a lot of managing their kids, overseeing their kids, a lot of tension in relationships. And I knew there was something missing. There was something missing out on the whole parenting experience. As I entered my 30s, I started to feel this sense that I could do better with parenting than any of my friends. I knew that because the bar was set very low on parenting, like just survival and just, threatening your kids or bribing your kids. And I knew there was something deeper, and I knew I understood on a more fundamental level that parenting had to do with nurture. And I think a lot of it was because in my 20s, I focused a whole decade on my own healing journey. And so I knew that, parenting was about helping another person with their journey. And so I knew that, but I didn't know exactly what that meant with parenting exactly. So there's a couple other things going on. So I got married when I was 33. When I got married, I still wasn't ready, I think, to have kids. And I really didn't even want to have kids at that time. It wasn't necessarily by that time I was refusing to have kids. It's just, it wasn't exciting because I just didn't have that model, that the essence of what parenting could be. And deep inside, I knew that there was something that was awesome about parenting, but I didn't see any examples and I didn't know exactly how to get there. Fast forward, and we had our first child when I was about, I think, 40 or so. So I was about 40 years old. So somewhere around that time. And when I had my first child, during the pregnancy process, it's fantastic. I love pregnancy because it gives you 9 months to prepare, right? To have a child, to welcome a child into this world. And during that time, I really started to unpack and unlearn everything I learned about parenting. And I said, I want to blow up this whole model of what parenting is and what parenting has been, not just in my life, but in all the examples. And I had read a lot of parenting books and I just couldn't find anything that I liked. So I said, let's blow it up and let's throw out the whole idea of the parent as the enforcer, right? The parent as the person trying to manage, right, the kid. The parent trying to keep control. As I noticed a lot of parenting books and a lot of my friends, that's most of their energy. They're just trying to keep control, right? Keep sanity, keep afloat with all this stuff, especially with younger kids. And so I said, okay, what if we actually blew it up? And what if we didn't have rules? And what if we didn't have punishment? And what if we didn't even have spanking and no timeouts? One of the TV shows my wife and I watched in our 30s was this TV show called Super Nanny. And the whole concept of Super Nanny was you have all of these rules, but they're strict. I would say they're strict, they're super specific. And then you have super specific consequences, right? Timeouts and etc. that the kids you lay it out so they're not unexpected. They're expected things, right? And I looked at that and we really got into this. I watched a good season or two. And at first it looks good. It looks like, wow, this is going to help people parenting and all this stuff. It helps kids with having expectations about what happens when they do certain things. And now there's set rules and there's set consequences. But when I got into that and I started to watch these kids' reactions, I started to pick up on the flaws of that model. And I started to pick up on how punishment and fear, once they enter a relationship, it introduces tension. And once you put in rules as a system to manage actions and behavior, you're putting into play an external system that you're relying on. That's an external system that's not dependable as if it was an internal kind of guide and compass that each person has. And I think also having a background of kind of an abusive family upbringing with just extreme amount of physical punishment, that it helped me to understand kind of the psychological effects of punishment, not just physical, but even just the fear of punishment and the understanding, rules. And after a while, I started to unpack and realize the super nanny model was not just extremely limiting, but I felt it was actually the epitome of everything that's wrong with parenting and parenting today. And it's and let me explain further. I started to think, what if you could get rid of the whole rule system, the whole punishment system, right? Everything that the super nanny and everything that the modern day parenting model stands for. What if you just tossed everything, blew it up? And what if you actually talk to your kids rationally? What if you actually approach them relationally, where you didn't have a system of rules, you didn't have punishment as this tool you brought out to enforce behavior, but rather as human to human, you help them think through decisions, think through circumstances, think through pros and cons, and help them understand consequences to actions and behavior, and actually empower them to make their own decisions. Meaning, what if you just don't force kids to do anything that you are forcing them to do? What if actually their decisions are from their own self and they're making that and they feel empowered? And what if there is no rules? What if there is no punishment? What if you never do a timeout? What if you never yell at your kids? You never berate your kids? You never, tell your kids what to do, all this stuff? What would happen? What would happen if you parented like that? And these were my thoughts during pregnancy with our first kid. And it came to this point where after my son was born, a couple months in, I was like, that's it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to go for it, because I think this is like having a relationship and seeing my son out of the womb. I started to think, all of the things that I was thinking about, actually, I think they're from a place of truth and wisdom, and I want to try it out. So I said, okay, let's try this out. Rather than a top-down approach with rules and punishment, all this stuff, bribes, controlling, managing, all that typical parenting stuff, let's toss it. Let's do a partner coach approach. And the essence of it is, hey, for a time being, for 10 years, 15 years, I don't know what that exact period, but I am a coach, I am a partner, I am coming alongside. And yes, I'm a parent as well. And in some ways, I do need to protect, let's say, for example, if they're walking down the street and a car is coming, I need to protect in those situations. But in the bigger picture, if you look at it from a super long-term perspective, let's say thousands and thousands of year perspective, long-term, my main relationship with my kids is I'm a forever friend. I'm a friend. And I think it goes beyond just decades. And I started to try to get my wife on board. And when my first son was just a few months old, and my wife had initially a hard time understanding what I was talking about because it seems so just crazy. Like, what do you mean no rules? What do you mean no punishment? What do you mean empowering their own action, their own decisions? Like all this stuff. And whenever there was an issue with our son during the first year, my wife would kind of instinctually go back to kind of this traditional parenting model that she grew up, that she knew, and I would catch her. And the cool thing was we were both at home. We're both super involved with our son, just daily, on a daily basis all day. And I was able to say, hey, no, let's not do that. Forget the traditional approach. Let's do it as if we're parenting as a coach, a friend, helping him to understand his own decisions and own it and speak to him, And it was crazy because by the time my son was 1 years old, I was having full-on conversations. Like, I don't know exactly how much he understood exactly because, he's not talking much, but I think he understood a lot of the gist of it, the respect I was giving him. And I would talk to him a lot, I'd talk to him all day, just like hanging out, chatting and explaining stuff. And it's amazing how much kids pick up at an early age. I think we don't give enough credit for kids and what they pick up. Over the years, so it's been 6 years of implementation of this new parenting model for me with my son, but also we have a daughter as well. And the end result is it's been 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times better than I had ever dreamed or expected. I had hoped that doing a different way would be double or triple, more enjoyment, more fulfillment with my kids, etc. What I didn't expect in this whole process was a complete just transformation of what is even possible. And I'll give one example is because my wife and I, we've never really done punishment or fear or rules. We've never spanked our kids. We've never had to give timeouts. We've never had to berate them and yell at them and all this stuff. Because of that, there's something that's pure and there isn't resentment on our kids' side. And there's such a freedom of trust. And it's hard to explain it without experiencing it per se. But it was in my relationship with my parents, like there was all this tension and this resentment, and I pick it up like actually with kids in systems of punishment and rules. I mean, that's traditional parenting. There's tension. And that's the thing. Most of the traditional parenting world is not going to pick up that tension. And if you're an existing parent, the chances are what I am saying and my approach, you might have a lot of problems with, and you might have a lot of skepticism and doubt. And I think that's fine. And I don't know if actually I can convince you because you have probably your own way of doing it and you think it's worked so far. I think my approach is probably will be more effective to those who are new to parenting because it requires a complete reboot. But the essence of it is I'm able to have a relationship with my kids that's free of that tension, of there's been no punishment. There's been no timeouts, no yelling, no, like that junk isn't there in the relationship. And because of that, there's such a pure trust and such a pure intimacy in the relationship that has blown me away. Like that's the one thing that I did not expect with this parenting approach. And it's this intimacy that's for example, my daughter is 3 years or my son's 6. They can come and sit next and just cuddle or lay their head on my shoulder and we talk. And the way we talk, it's beyond child parent, enforcer, whatever child, like, and it's to the point where it's almost like forever friends are connecting and there's no inhibitions. And this is what has blown me away with my parenting journey. I've learned a lot along the way, and there's been, challenges that I've had to overcome, and a lot of lessons. And a lot of it in my journey has been trying to, rather than go to the traditional models and books and all this stuff, my go-to is I go to what's the essence of parenting, and how can I just build it up from first principles, like what am I trying to do? And I believe, and it's my parenting philosophy, and this is what I've kind of uncovered and picked, is I think the essence of parenting is empowerment. It's to empower your kids. And it's not, and this is another thing. A lot of people think parenting is it's a very possessive thing that the traditional model has come up with. Like, my kids, I will teach them and I will tell them what to do and keep them from doing bad things and all this stuff. And one day they will be on their own. But it's a very possessive model. And I believe the essence of parenting, it's a relational model. I do not possess my kids. I have no right to force stuff down their throat and to, make them afraid of me and to do all this crazy stuff. Like, I respect them as equals. And in a sense, I actually uphold them and I respect them higher, in a sense, as people with great potential, far greater potential than myself. And in that sense, it's what would I have wanted as a parent? Would I have wanted a system of rules and punishment and bribes and my parents managing me and telling me what to do and trying to keep control and being stressed out? Or would I want a parent who's like my best friend, and a parent who comes alongside me, talks to me all day, and we talk about different things and we look at things from different angles, and my parent helps me to understand my decisions, helps me to understand the consequences, and helps me to explore the world and to be confident about exploring the world. And I think that's kind of where the essence of parenting is, for me personally. It's different, and a lot of the stuff, my first video here, is not going to be, I'm not going to lay out a million examples per se, but I think that's part of this channel, or what I hope to do, is to lay out more concrete examples, because a lot of this stuff of what I'm talking about parenting really gets crystallized in examples, really gets crystallized in real life, like what happens when this crazy situation, because parenting can be messy, right? Kids can be very strong-willed. Like, my son is very strong-willed. He knows exactly what he wants, and it could be, lots of stuff can happen, and how do you deal with that, right? And a lot of this stuff really requires, I think, illustrations, examples to really, show how it plays out in real life. And so that's kind of, the background of this channel. I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap up this live stream by taking some of the questions that you guys have in the live stream. First off, I want to thank you guys for joining and for being part of this effort to establish and to share a new model of parenting. What I think is I think one of the most important things in the world to get out. All right. Chop969. Dave, I apologize if you've already been asked. What is your approach to a tantrum or child acting out? I put in quotes because a 3-year-old still learning and developing, etc. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, kids can have very strong, the stronger willed, the personality that your child has, the more apt they are to really want what they want, right? The concept of a tantrum, in my opinion, is a tantrum is when the kid feels there's no hope to get their way, that they feel totally out of control, meaning they've lost all sense of stability and their ability to control their world and what they know, because they're unable to get their way in that sense. And I think it's important to put yourself into the kid's situation. Kids need to have a sense, I believe, of control of their situation to a certain extent. They need to be able to know that they're safe, right? They need to know that everything in their life is not going to be taken away from them, right, at any moment. And I think it's important to be acknowledging, to be able to preserve that sense of control. And if your child is having constant tantrums, that's the link. It's the link. You've got to understand the felt kind of trauma, the felt hopelessness and despair the kid is feeling at that moment. Over the years, we've had times where our kids have had kind of that extra, just got to get something, or acting out, let's say tantrum, etc. A few just specific tips, and I'll move on, because something like this actually requires, I think, building a foundation. But a couple of tips to help. First is, if your child is having, let's say, tantrum at a store, wanting something like a toy, you go to a store, they're wanting a toy, they flip out because they can't get the toy. You need to, I think, what we do is I head on that thing before you get to the store, because it's empathy. You got to understand, the kid goes to a store, they see 100 toys, they flip out because they want at least one toy. In their mind, in their world, it makes no sense not to get a toy. So what I do is, before I go into a place, I'll say, hey, we're going to get one small thing. Is that okay with you guys? But I explain what's going on. I go, hey, we've got so many stuff in our house. Do you guys want to get a ton of stuff and just build up our house and make it into a hoarder house and just have all this stuff? Or would you rather have a very calm, clean house where we can enjoy it more? It's up to you guys. In a sense, I don't even push that. That's up to them to decide. They could say, hey, I want a crazy, messy house with 1 million toys, right? That's their decision. But I present, I go, hey, if you want 1 million toys, and then I show them some hoarder videos on YouTube of people who have stuff to the ceiling of their house and rodents and all this stuff. I go, do you want to live like that, right? And they're like, not really. So before I go to this, let's say I'm in the car, right? I'm going to some store that has some toys. I'm like, hey, what do you guys think? How about, we get just one small thing. Unless you guys want, a lot of things and, hoard our house, whatever. We'll talk it through before we go in. And then they go, oh, okay, yeah, let's do one thing. And we'll go in, and they know exactly, they'll take one thing. But then even if they take one thing, even before I have it all planned, I go, okay, you guys, let's prune some. I call it pruning, but let's get rid of something at our house so we don't pile up all these extra things. So it's a process where before I go into the store, they know that they're making a decision if they want to get rid of something, what they want to get rid of. They know that they're going to maybe choose one thing or whatever they're deciding. And so before they go into the store, they're in control, right? They know what's going on, and they're like, there's no tantrum because there's everything is laid out. It's a completely 180 different approach than, I think, just haphazardly taking your kid to a store with lots of toys and expecting the kid to not want a toy and not flip out, right, if they can't have a toy. Anyways, that's a specific tip. Lots of stuff. I think a foundation needs to be laid, though, to really build to address things like this. Radovan says, understanding the development stage at every point has helped me become a much better parent to my 3 and 2-year-old. Yeah, no, understanding development is important, each stage. And, I've read a bunch of books in, like, even my 20s and it's part of my own human kind of healing journey, but of human development, of psychological development, how people learn. And I think it's great to understand that. But again, I think a lot of the traditional model, they underestimate how much kids pick up how much they understand, but also they underestimate the psychological impact of punishment, of fear, and yeah, that's something I'm picking up. Yeah, I think something to consider. Erkan says, I would love that if you could talk about kids' nutrition in future episodes, from what mom eats to kids growing up. Yeah, no, I'm huge on nutrition and food. It's something that we've dived into a lot. And yeah, and we really made it a big priority to make sure that they're eating, what I think is some of the best stuff. All right, Alex says, such a great idea. Thanks so much for sharing your stories. Daily on Parenting would be a perfect tie to your current channel, and the opportunity for more spin-offs is there too. Yep, I could change it to Daily on Investing or Daily on Parenting. That's fine. Erkan says, punishment only makes your child feel not worthy. Nothing good comes out of it, short-term and long-term. Yeah, here's my take on punishment. I think a lot of parents think that punishment is just the lesser of two evils. For example, here's punishment, and then here's no punishment and anarchy and crazy kids who are undisciplined and just, it's just crazy. So that's how they look at the situation. Therefore, they look at punishment as, oh, I don't like to punish my kids, but it's better than no punishment and letting my kids just be crazy, reckless, undisciplined, spoiled kids. That's the rationale. What I'm giving here and what my approach is, I'm saying that's not the full picture here. The full picture is punishment sucks as in parenting, and anarchy sucks as parenting too. And it could suck worse, it's completely just reckless, whatever, an absentee parent, whatever. What I'm proposing and what I've invested the majority of my time over the past 6 or 7 years is investing into a parenting. And it's a huge investment. Like some people think, oh yeah, parenting, it's just about overseeing your kids and you can delegate it. But I don't know. I don't know how to delegate personally. I mean, I think you can delegate some parts of it, but I don't know. I mean, I know each parent's situation is very different, but I'm just saying in our situation, we've decided to dive into it and say, hey, we're very hands-on. It's not what people think. If you get rid of punishment, then you're hands off and kids do anything and it's just whatever. No, we're actually very hands on. I'm talking to my kids all day long. My wife is hanging out, talking to the kids all day long. We're going through situations. We're going through, just discussing things. What would happen? What's the ins and outs? What's the pros and cons of different decisions and actions, and what can we learn about things? And we're constantly going through these things where we're helping our kids own decisions. We're helping our kids evaluate decisions. We're not forcing it on them per se, but we're helping them decipher the world and the consequences. Because here's the thing, when you make an action, we make a decision or something, there's consequences that actually span multiple time frames. And that's kind of one of the difficult things to comprehend for kids, because you do an action and kids say, okay, nothing happened. It's gone, right? It's done. But no, there's a impact, a consequence tomorrow and a week and a year and 10 years, especially if that becomes a habit, right? If you're fighting with your siblings, it becomes a habit, punching them, pushing them, etc. You do that for 1 week, 10 weeks, a year, 10 years, whatever, a lifetime. There's immense consequences. Kids don't naturally pick that up because those consequences are over time and they're not real in the present, in the now. And that's what me as a parent, one of my main roles is I come alongside and say, hey, we have something here. Let's look at the consequences over time. If this action continues or becomes a habit, it gets exponentially magnified. That's the whole thing. You take an action, it gets exponentially magnified over time frames, right? Going out forward, if it continues as in a habitual way. This is the stuff that kids need to have hands-on help with. They need someone to walk alongside with them. They need a coach, a partner, someone right there, accessible throughout the day, I think, who could help them through that. That's the alternative to this whole punishment versus anarchy, that most parents think those are the only two options out there. Anyways, I hope some of this stuff is this is helping you guys. All right, solving the money problem. Stephen Mark Ryan, what's up? Fascinating. No, I'm serious, man. This stuff is so fascinating to me. It just blows me away that the traditional or the world at large is completely missing this. It's like they've completely put our kids into institutions. Like, for example, stick the kids into daycare, into preschool, into first grade, and ship them off into, elementary school, junior high, and then, stick them. We've completely institutionalized, right, our kids' educations to the point where we've put the role of the parent into this role of just for a time being, you're going to try to stay afloat, stay alive, keep them alive, and help them not to be crazy kids, so that once they get to kindergarten or first grade, then the school system can take over and so-called educate your kids. And so we built this whole world on this crazy system. It's really a crazy system, and the whole model of parenting fits into that crazy system of, delegate your kids' education to this institution, which you don't even know what they're teaching you. Do you think really your kids are going to get the optimal education by sticking your kids with 30 other kids and the teacher is just doing mostly classroom management, right? This is crazy. And then you fit your parenting model to adjust to this whole institutionalism of our kids and education, where you think your role of a parent is just to, feed them and keep them alive, 4 or 5 years and ship them off to some other people. And I think we were missing the essence of what parenting is. Like, people don't understand this. Parenting is amazing. Like, you can have the most awesome relationship with your kids. They could blow you away. And here's the awesome thing is, by doing this model of bringing it down, walking with your kids side by side, forgetting punishment, forgetting berating and yelling and rules and all that stuff, helping them internalize principles and the delayed, right, impact of consequences over time frames. By doing that, what happens is the kid, at least in my experience, my kids, their behavior, it's incomparable. Can't compare my kids' behavior to any other kids, at least that I know personally or that I've known in the past. Because my kids just, they take ownership of their actions. And the cool thing is, the amazing thing is, my kids, 3 and 6, they are the most amazing playmates together. It's amazing how they play. They're always just like, of course there's the, occasional, butting heads and all that stuff. But generally speaking, every day I'm looking at them like, oh my gosh, can 2 kids play this well together? They actually trust each other and they actually care for each other. And especially my son is very, very strong-willed, and it's to see the interaction happening, and it's just mind-blowing. And I attribute it, there's different factors involved with the environment and et cetera, but I attribute a lot of it is to my kids own their actions. They understand what happens if they're mean / just fighting and just at it all day, what's going to happen ultimately to their relationship over multiple time frames. They understand what's going to happen like right now, tomorrow, next year, in 10 years, in 50 years. Like, I actually lay out some of these circumstances. Let's talk about this, let's say we're fighting all the time. We don't like each other. What's going to happen? I go through the timeline. Let them figure it out, right? And what's in 50 years? What is this going to look like? How are you guys going to? What type of relationship are you guys going to have? And I go, do you guys want that? Is that what you want? It's their decision, right? Everything is their decision in a sense. And when they internalize that, their actions just radically are so beyond their ears, and the relationship is beyond their ears too. And every day I'm just blown away. I'm just like, wow, I just can't believe kids, not just kids, can be so awesome to hang out with and to enjoy and just to, because this is the other thing. I don't spend a lot of energy managing them, because we've built up so many years of principle and thinking and their own empowerment, all this stuff. It was harder earlier on, actually. The first few years, we really had to work through a lot of stuff to build this in. But now it's actually, I don't put in much effort to manage. So let's say I go somewhere with my kids. Let's say I take them in the car and we're hanging out, a few hours or do something, or I don't know, whatever the thing is. I'm not exerting near the same amount of energy as a typical parent would by kind of managing, being a hawk over the kids. Because here's the thing, when you do a rule-based, punishment-based, bribe-based approach, you have to maintain that system continuously. Once that system goes down, your kids don't have any, they're not controlled anymore, right? The system is controlling them. So you always have to control the system. That's why parents, in my experience, most of them are constantly stressed around their kids because they're constantly have to enforce the system that's controlling their kids. They're the enforcer of the rules and punishment. And it's draining for parents. But when I go out or when I'm with my kids, in or out, wherever, I don't have a system to enforce. I'm not the enforcer of any rules or punishment or whatever. I'm just hanging out with my kids. And my kids understand consequences and they understand their actions and what's going on. So it's the most freeing experience. Like sometimes I just shake my head in disbelief. I'm like, how is it possible that parenting a 3-year-old and 6-year-old can be this awesome? How can it be so just relaxing and freeing? And how can I have just like this, just such a mind-boggling kind of pure trust, it's just amazing type of experience that I see. And it's amazing that this isn't exposed more or talked about more or shown more as models. And I think we have a generation of people who might be reserved to have kids because they don't see this model. And they're like, hey, I don't see this. Like, what do I want to really, spend years and years of my life, trying to enforce rules and, constrain and constrict kids, and fight and all this stuff and ship them off to school. And it's just, it's definitely crazy, fascinating stuff that, that we're talking about here. Question, Jesus Plaza, how do you make sure that they don't hurt themselves and how do you teach them important things? Yeah, so hurting themselves, again, a lot of it is, there are times where, for example, if, my son is running toward, let's say, the street, and, it's like cars are coming, like, yeah, that time I would go, stop, or I pick them up, right? I mean, there's a level of safety, right, that you need to preserve. So that's part of the whole parenting experience, I think, that you need to protect them from, dangerous situations, right? And so I'm not by any means advocating letting them loose and not watching them, right? No, this is, what I'm saying is a very hands-on approach, actually. In terms of teaching them important things, what's more important than thinking through things accurately, right? Understanding things, thinking the pros and cons, making your own decisions and owning those decisions and understanding the consequences over various time frames. You'd be surprised, like once kids just don't pick it up as an exercise, but once it becomes a foundation, like they don't know anything else but to think that way, it shapes their whole behavior and it shapes everything. Like, for example, like kids have such amazing curiosity on their own. And for me as a parent, one of my responsibilities or jobs, I think, is just to foster that curiosity, not to force them to learn something that they don't want to learn, right? So, from a very young age, like, I'll give a bunch of books in Israel, I'll order a bunch of books. We've had even like all these like science encyclopedia, kids encyclopedia science type of books that are directed more to like 8 to 10-year-olds. But I bought a bunch and a lot of different types of books because I'm like, hey, if a kid is curious, they're going to be curious and they're going to want to learn. Even though they might not understand everything, they can see the pictures and, grasp different stuff. And so ever since my kid was like probably 2 years old, he's been into these like science encyclopedia books that I don't even push on him, but I'll come alongside and read it with him and talk to him. And if there are months and months that go by that he doesn't pick it up, that's fine, right? Like he's going to be fine if he has the foundation of, really critical thinking, clear thinking, understanding consequences, and my job also is to encourage curiosity, adventure, is to, really help open up the world to him. Right. And that's kind of something that I'm always thinking about of what to do. Paul Tomko says, friends always also have a very strong influence on you growing up as a kid. Many kids want to feel accepted by their peers. Do you try to monitor who your kids' friends are, who they spend time with? Yeah, I mean, my kids right now are 3 and 6. They're kind of on the young age. We, aren't sending our kids to school. We're doing life together with them. We're traveling a lot with them. Last year we were in an RV for 4.5 months. So, I mean, we do have, we actually just moved to Texas, but back when in California, we had our neighborhood friends, the neighborhood clubs, etc., that we're part of, that we're hanging out with. And yeah, we were able to monitor, who their friends are. And that's the thing. At a certain age, when they're intaking so fast and they're so impressionable, yeah, I don't want, some random kid to spend an hour with my son spewing all this like stuff. I don't know where and what they're talking about, where they're learning it. It's not the exact thing. It's the values and it's just, that's not helpful. I mean, if they're coming with helpful, like, healthy values, that's fantastic. Right. But a lot of kids, like, man, I'm telling you, you put them in a system of fear and punishment and shame, bribing, manipulation, all this stuff of traditional parenting, and then you let them loose with other kids. Man, I'm telling you, it's like tough to find kids with really healthy perspectives. And it's a problem. Yeah. Michael Mitchell says, I didn't develop a plan like this ahead of time, but even before she could talk, I found myself explaining things to her like a normal human. Definitely. Jason Capadia says, how do you incentivize excelling in traditional education when they and you as a parent know these learning tasks won't be necessary in real life? Moving to the new paradigm of education is glacier. Yeah. Okay. So with traditional education, I mean, I'm not going to throw everything out per se. I think it has a role. I mean, especially we have such diversity, and there's lots of backgrounds, and education and our school systems do play a crucial role, especially, say you're working mom, you're single mom, and you need that help, or struggling family, like schools definitely play an important role. So I'm not going to minimize that in any way. I also think, colleges in some senses, like I had a great experience in college. It really helped me, grow my mind and exposure in different ways. I'm not going to bash college saying it's completely unnecessary. I think it's situational. My perspective, though, with kind of education, but how to encourage is when you take a deeper kind of longer term perspective, let's say over thousands of years, just look at the bigger picture. What's important, or let's even go drill down, let's say next 10, 20, 30 years, that's probably more realistic. But what's important is not necessarily the topic of history or the topic of, whatever book you're reading. What's going to be important for a person's longer term trajectory in life is going to be the ability, the hunger for knowledge, the hunger for wisdom. This humility to know that you don't know it all, but there's so many fascinating things in the world to know, right? This respect for humanity, the respect for societies, for culture, for people, right? I mean, this is one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of traveling. I want my kids to appreciate people and languages and cultures and different things and history and all this stuff. But I think there's a place where you can and it develops from a kid where you realize, like, wow, there's so much awesomeness to learn in the world, right? And I think that is the foundation of all education, is not forcing down, right, the kid's throat what you want them to learn in certain criteria, but rather building up the curiosity, the desire, the hunger, the realization of how awesome, amazing, right? The world and so much out there is to explore. That is the key to true knowledge, to true education. And you need to prioritize. Sometimes you can't do everything well. Like, for example, my 6-year-old, he just turned 6, but I'm not really teaching him how to read or write or do any of the traditional things right now. What I'm doing right now is I'm focusing on prioritizing. I can't do everything. He's not going to be, this crazy reader by 5 years old, because that's not what I'm prioritizing. I'm prioritizing a hunger, a curiosity, a critical thinking, exploration, a confidence, right, in himself. And because of that, he's learning that stuff, but his reading, the funny thing is, we're not even really teaching him to read, but he's starting to pick up it by himself. And he's starting to pick up different letters. He's picking up different words. And he's like, Dad, I'm teaching myself how to read. I hear that. I'm like, dude, you are teaching yourself how to read, really, because you want to, like, he really wants to. And that's how I want him to learn how to read. I want him to want to learn how to read. That's more important than actual reading, is that desire, the hunger to learn how to read. Anyways, what I'm saying with education is, what's more fundamental than the actual skills is the actual foundation of hunger, desire. I think we miss out. We force education, we force things down our kids' throats before they're ready or wanting to, and we don't, really nurture what we need. And it's precious. Kids have so much curiosity. We could just nurture them if we really are intentional with that. Anthony Garcia, when will you help them open a brokerage so they can start investing young? How will you encourage your kids during that process? Yeah, I think it all starts with their concept of money. And I think a lot of times when you teach kids about money in the wrong way and you introduce them to money as this kind of all-powerful tool to buy anything and do anything with, I think it kind of distorts. There's a distortion that goes on where it's like, oh, I want to have more money so I could do more things and be more powerful, right? I can get unlimited toys with unlimited money, right? And I think that's actually a disservice to our kids to teach them money from that angle. And that's one of my reservations with teaching, with talking about money to my kids too early on, is I don't want to introduce them to money with a distorted view that, oh, if you just have more, it's all powerful, you can have all the toys and you have no problems in your life, right? That's kind of a traditional, that's the result, I think, of some traditional type of teachings on money, especially with kids. What I want to do is I want to take a step back and say, okay, what is going on here? What's going to be helpful, right, for them longer term? And what I want to teach them more is on value. I want to teach them, okay, you can help people by creating a company, by creating a product, by creating a service. And you could give it to them and you can take, different resources they give you to create more stuff and to build more things. And I want to help them understand how the world and the economy, trade and barter and systems work in terms of a concept of how to help people. And in the process of helping people, how that creates extra value, extra resources, and how that's able to grow and to help people even more. And from that angle, that's how, I'm planning to teach whole investing, etc. It's a different angle, I know, and it's something I'm taking my time with, actually, and I'd rather actually wait until they're able to pick up more on their own. So we'll go on. Yong Feng says, my daughter is 1.5 years old. She's stuck in China with my wife due to the pandemic. I miss them a lot and will look forward to following these sessions to learn from you for better parenting. Yeah, I wish you the best. I know it must be heartbreaking and difficult to be separated. Paul Tomko says, more and more kids are immersed in the metaverse between Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, and more. Do you control this at all? How do you find a healthy balance? This is a tricky, touchy subject. I think some people will look at video games, the metaverse, etc., and be categorically kind of demonizing all of that, saying, oh, it's terrible, screen time is terrible, all this stuff. I think that part is missing. I'm not going to discount that completely, but it's missing some of the benefits of technology, some, like, when you compare it to, for example, let's say you have absentee parents and your kid is just stuck in a room. Is it better to just let them be bored and neglected, let's say 12 hours a day, if you only had two choices, right? Or would it be better for them to be more engaged, right? Let's say inside some type of, whether it be entertainment, whether it be educational entertainment or something, or exploration or whatever. And we can argue on how safe and healthy certain things are. And I mean, that's another debate. But I think there is some role for, let's say, for the metaverse, for certain educational resources and entertainment resources, etc. Now, another angle is this: is that ideal? And a lot of times parents can't really ask that question because, we have a lot of people who are struggling just to make ends meet. You have people working, two parents working full-time jobs and extra jobs, and they don't have the luxury to say, hey, what is ideal? And I completely understand that point. But let's take a step back and say, okay, let's say if you did have resources, if you did have the luxury to say what is ideal in terms of parenting and kids' education experience, I don't think a lot of this entertainment, video games, etc. is ideal. I think it's far from ideal. I don't know. Maybe in the future there could be improvements, but I lean toward the angle where if I'm trying to instill a foundational level of curiosity, of hunger for more, for adventure, for this awe and respect of nature and humanity and the world, if I'm trying to do that, Roblox and Minecraft and all this stuff for it is not the best. I'd rather take my kids and have them hang out for a month in Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks and have them check out the wildlife and camp under the stars and do campfires and see forests and hang out at lakes and see majestic mountains and gaze at the Grand Canyon and ask, how is this possible? The Grand Canyon over and over and over. I want to give them that type of experience of a mind-boggling experience of such depth and experience that they will never forget because it becomes foundational in their experience. And that's where I'm like, if I have the time, if I have the resources, there's an opportunity to gift to my kids an amazing foundation of experience that is just, you can't compare it to whatever else is out there. And that's kind of my approach, right? And that's why, our kids, we don't even have a TV at home, there's no video games at our house, because I'm like, it just doesn't compare in terms of what I'm trying to do, right? I don't know when or how or if that will come into play. But at this moment, I just feel like there's so many things and experiences that I want to introduce them to that I think are far superior in so many ways. Erkan says another future episode about screen time would be helpful. Definitely agree. Solving the money problem. I consciously decided not to have kids until I'm confident I will do an amazing job. I'm so pumped for this channel, Dave. Hi. No, seriously, it was the exact same thing with me. I'm like, I need to figure out like what's the point, and I need to figure out how I could do a parenting, the job of parenting in a way that I'm going to be like super excited about, right? That I will have no regrets. And, so that was part of my journey of going into, or just my whole parenting journey. Street Path says, I'm going to have a daughter this June. Don't know how to be a father. Will definitely be the friend. I want to encourage you, Sri. There's always mixed messages of parenting and family. And I don't know your family background or your experience or, your expectations, but as a new father, right, I congratulate you. And it's such a precious experience. It's such a precious relationship of it's magical and mystical, and definitely life changing. I don't know, how. Yeah, you can't compare it to maybe you can, but it's on another level. I just want to welcome you, to fatherhood, and encourage you to really not just settle for what the traditional model of parenting will be, but to find your own model and approach to parenting. Gloria says, parents observed kids' behavior, such as lagging of self-discipline, time management. How do you communicate with them? This is very common tension coming from it. Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of this stuff is, for example, my kids, let's say at the end of the day, they don't want to clean up, right? We have a living room filled with toys and all this stuff. Like, this is going to be really hard for a lot of parents, a lot of people to conceptualize, especially parents who already are doing their thing. But for new and upcoming parents, I think this actually might make more sense. But my kids have all this stuff thrown all over the place, and we need to clean up for the day. And they're like, we don't want to clean up. We're too tired, right? It's like, forget it. Why clean up? Most parents would force their kids in some form or fashion, right? Give them punishment or bribes or yell or something. And, there will be this tension, this battle. And our end, my perspective, I'm like, there's no need for that, right? Zero. It's just, that's not even an option. So what we do is, our approach is like, hey, if you guys don't want to clean up, you guys don't have to clean up, right? That's your decision. Everything. I'm not one to strip away, right? Decision. Like, think about it. That's like, it's sacred in a sense. A person's ability and power to make their own decisions. Why strip that away? I don't know what healthiness comes from that. Like, kids have a sacred power to make decisions. I'm there to protect that, right? So if they're not wanting to clean up, I'm not going to strip their decision, the power to make decisions. But what I am going to do is, I'm going to help them understand the consequences to behaviors and actions over multiple timeframes and through exponential type of timeframes. For example, it's like, oh yeah, you guys, don't worry about it. You guys don't have to clean up at all. But let's talk about, like, what do you guys want to do? Do you want this to be like this tomorrow morning when we wake up? Do you like it like this? And let's not clean up every day. Let's not clean up for a week. And so sometimes I'll just take the other side and say, okay, guys, let's not clean up for a whole month. Let's just leave everything, leave even food on the ground, and let's let it pile up, and let's do an experiment on what's going to happen if we don't clean up anything for an entire week. And then I might even say, hey, do you want to see what happens, right? And my kids will be, yeah, what happens? And so we might look at, I might say, okay, let's see a video on, on some houses or some kids' houses that are so messy that they've never cleaned up in a long time. And we'll watch it and I go, hey, how does it feel to live in a house like that, where you just don't clean up for a month, right? And they probably started out just one day saying they don't want to clean up, right? And the next day they go, yeah, and they keep on going for a month, and now they've got hordes of junk and food, and my kids are like, they get shocked, right? Because they're like, oh man, that's pretty gross, right? To want to live like that, and I'm like, let's do it. Let's try it, right? Because I'm actually like, yeah, I'm open to it. A month of not cleaning up. Yeah. Hey, let's leave our dining table for a month like that too. Like, everything's a learning experience, right? And so I'm like, yeah, let's try it. And then my kid's like, oh no, forget it. I don't want to do that. I don't want to live like that. That's crazy. And I'm like, and they're like, oh, we're going to clean up. We're like, all right. And they start cleaning. I go, no, stop. Don't clean up. Don't clean up. I want to try this. Don't clean it for a month. Let's see what happens, right? And they're like, forget it. I'm going to clean up. This is like, and so they're cleaning up while I'm the person who's saying, what are you guys doing? I thought you guys were telling me you aren't going to clean up, right? So the whole approach is like completely opposite of the typical traditional parenting approach. The traditional parenting approach is like trying to, drag their arm, twist their arm, just try to shake them, tell them, clean up, and scare them and bribe them. Says, oh, if you clean up 5 days in a row, we'll give you $1, chore money or something. Like, what is that? It's like, why do kids need to have some bribe to be able to clean up? That's ridiculous. Why do kids have to have some type of fear of their parents hitting them or putting them in some timeout? That's craziness, right? If the kid is deciding not to clean up, it's because in their mind, they think it's the best thing, the most beneficial thing in their mind to not clean up. Therefore, if you are trying to punish them for what they think is the most beneficial thing to do, that is unfair. That's unjust in their mind. They're like, what the heck? Why are you punishing me? That's why most kids, when they get punished by their parents, they think it's unjust. Right? The parents think it's just because the parents think the kids should understand why their kids are being punished. No, the kids don't. The kids really think that it's the most beneficial, it's the correct, it's the right thing to do what they're doing. So therefore, they're not cleaning up because they're convinced it's the right thing to do. How are you going to punish them for thinking, for doing what they think they want to do and they think is right to do? It's crazy. And the end result is they're just going to feel shame. They're going to feel terrible about themselves. They're going to feel tension between you and them. There's going to be a breakage, and the next day they might feel happier, but that's going to linger. There's a lingering tension between, with punishment, and it's going to grow, and it's going to sabotage. It's going to sabotage parenting, the relationship. And you might not notice it because all your friends are like the same. All your friends are struggling to survive, struggling to manage their kids, but it's like, no, it's far, far from what I think, the true potential of parenting is all about. As you could tell, I have a lot of stuff to say on this topic of parenting because it spans so many years and so many experiences of just living and breathing this stuff with my kids, but prioritizing. Like, for example, with investing, it's something I'm passionate about, but with parenting, it's something I spent a lot more time on, actually. And I think a lot more about, actually, over time. Okay, Lily Kuo says, this is amazing, Dave. Curiosity and independent thinking are so difficult to teach. Looking forward to each and every session here. Yeah, thanks for being part of it. I appreciate it. Dude to Rock says, wondering what a trip to a restaurant is like for you. So it's different time periods. From 1 to 2 years old, 1 to 2.5, we're instilling, we're teaching, we're doing this stuff. It's still much more manageable than probably a lot of other parents, generally speaking, because we're building the foundation. But at a certain point, there was just a breakthrough. At a certain point, all of the stuff that we're doing, just empowering, preserving the sacredness of, let's say, my kids' own decision-making power, right? Not stripping that, and really working together with them to think through things and helping them own their decisions with every decision. And it's intense, right? To do this for every decision. But there was a certain breakthrough. And I don't know exactly where it happened, maybe between 2 and 3 years old, but it just got to this point where I could go, let's say, into a restaurant, and it just was just so too easy. As a parent, in seeing parents, you expect, a lot of tension, a lot of stress, especially with young kids, let's say, 2 young kids or something, a lot of stuff going on. But, there just came a point where all this stuff just started to settle in. And let's say my oldest at 3 years old or 4-year-old would just go into a restaurant, would just know exactly what to do. Like, we didn't even tell him, we're not even telling him what to do. Go to his seat, hang out, eat, we'll be chatting, hanging out. He'll be looking around, there's not much drama or anything. We're having a great time. Pack up, do the stuff, walk to the supermarket or something. And it's so strange because I'm like, this is kind of unreal. And it's unreal too because my son is very strong-willed. Like, if we stick our son in and ask another person to parent him for a day, the other parent, I don't think that there's really anyone who can handle the amount of tension, and because he's so strong-willed. But to see this, and then to see my second also, who has a more mild-tempered kind of personality, but to see them from an early age, and then let's say we go to a restaurant, it's just like, wow, man, something clicked where the investment started to pay off. Where in the beginning, it was within range, let's say, of others, but then it just started to become exponentially different, the entire experience. There've been lots of issues and struggles and challenges. Like, for example, how did we get our kids to get in a car seat? Or how do we get our kids to do X, Y, and Z? Or what was our approach? How did we help our son or daughter figure out things to own it themselves, right? Because there are times where, let's say you're late to something and we need to go, but they don't want to go. What do you do in that case? And yeah, there's a lot of situations like that, and it requires, I think, sticking to certain basic principles and fundamental principles of this. For example, the sacred power of decision making. Like, they need to keep it, right? You have no right to strip it from them. Unless it's really a life-threatening or super dangerous situation. But when you stick to certain things, your brain starts to kick in also, and it starts to come up with creative ideas on how to help them, right? And that's part of parenting is, yeah, you need to come up with ideas to empower them rather than just relying on a traditional rule-based, punishment-based approach, which I don't even think works that well. W. Park, do you have any advice for parenting teenagers without having gone through your parenting style? Yeah, so I've thought about this. Occasionally through the years, I might get some people who say, "Hey, I missed out. I missed out on the early years because I followed a traditional model, and I now seen the limitations, the mistakes, and I don't know what to do right now. Is there anything I could do to, to fix or to change, my parenting relationship with my kids?" And I think there is. Everything can be, I think, fixed and modified in some ways. On one hand, you're not going to be able to instill the super foundational things where that's the only thing they knew. Like, for example, with my kids, because I started in a very fortunate way. Like, I started when they were just born. I was able to really work on that so they don't know anything else, right? So in your experience, that's probably not going to happen because there was another way, another foundation that was built. I think a lot of times we underestimate the power of the foundational learning experience that happens in a sacred parent-child relationship. I mean, this is really intense stuff, and a lot happens in that relationship. And I think when it's fear-driven, punishment, bribes, manipulation, all this stuff, control, that's putting seeds and a foundation in that relationship that is done. It's there, right? And so part of the job now is like, okay, what can we do to unlearn that and help my kids unlearn that and to put in a new foundation? And that's a process where I think it's a bit more difficult in a way because unlearning something sometimes is more difficult than just learning it the right way the first time. Right. But I think the first step is just realizing, hey, yeah, maybe there was things, I did that was far less than ideal, had some maybe potential negative effects. How can I address this? And I think the first thing is saying, hey, to your kids, say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm starting to realize that my parenting style, my parenting approach was wrong in a lot of ways, and it could have hurt your development and how you're thinking. I'm not sure exactly everything I did that was wrong, but I'm starting to realize that, and I want to share that with you. And I want to, try to make that right. I want to try to do my best to correct that. And just that one act, especially if your kids are teenagers, you'd be amazed at what that does to their mind. They're like, really? It's like, whoa. I mean, that blows your kids' minds because they're like, my parents are admitting that they did a lot of stuff wrong. It's like, what could be wrong? And that helps your kids also look back and say, yeah, Dad, you really messed up, like X, Y, and Z. Or, they might know some, but they might not know all of it too, because the foundational experiences are so ingrained in their brain that they are not going to be able to even decipher some of the stuff that you made mistakes on themselves. So it's going to be a process, and it's not going to be fixed in one day. But yeah, I think it's definitely nothing to lose hope over. There's lots of hope. Jesus Plaza says, do you use music with your kids to play, learn, and relax? I'm a big believer in music. We have like a guitar out. We have a electric piano out. I like my kids actually listening to music and kind of exploring with that, because I think there's whole nother dimension that music brings that is not completely explainable because it's beyond explanation. Music is amazing. It's almost a portal to another dimension. And I want to introduce my kids to that. I want them to see the magic of music. it's something that, for example, I'll sit down on the piano and I'll just start playing and sing a song. We have like a binder of music or a guitar, and I'll try to add different emotions so they could feel the emotion of music and the emotion and the creative power of music. And that's more important than them learning how to play the music right now. Right? I'm not forcing them to take piano lessons or guitar lessons or this or this or this, or teach them how to sing per se, but I'm trying to help them grasp like, wow, music is crazy. This is amazing. And so I walk them through that process. Sometimes I'll play something. How does that make you feel? Right? Like, what if I change it? How does that make you feel? And yeah, it's a fun process. Music is awesome. I love it. Um, yeah, Linus Erickson says, "What are some of your kids' daily activities?" Yeah, it depends on what are. I mean, this is the thing. We've gone through this process for a long time, so we have a foundation where our kids really are able to adjust to so many situations. So if we're traveling, we could travel. If we're home, we could be at home. Like, for example, if it's snowing or let's say raining outside, we could stay at home, right? Or do some errands. One of our things we try to rely on is trying to get outside, trying to do some hikes. We want to be close to some places where we can, get fresh air, be outside. When I get stuck in a house or in an environment for too long, I worry about my kids because I feel like they are going to get boxed in and I'm not opening up the world enough for them. And that's where after a few months where I'm like, I start telling my wife, I go, I think our kids need more. I'm like, what can we do? And that's where some ideas like long trips or, going places and exploring and taking out our RV or doing something come up. And I'm always constantly thinking, because I think a lot of times our environment shapes also our kids' curiosity. If you stick them in the same place and same boring environment constantly, it's really tough for them to be excited about stuff. And that's something like most people think that they can't fix. And I understand the limitations and the frustrations that it can be very difficult to fix. But for those who might, be thinking outside the box, like that's something I think that can be fixed. And that's something I'm constantly thinking about as well. Sandy T says, our children are fellow human beings. Also, they and even animals are a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for. Speaking as a parent and physician, those interested in attachment theory, yes, I definitely agree. Yeah, definitely agree with all of that. Yalda says, hi, Dave. I recently watched a video on the need to teach children emotional intelligence. Can you comment on practical tips on how this can be taught now or in a future episode? Thanks. Yeah, I look at it more in context of the relationship of the parent and child. It's so foundational. And I think that's where a lot of the emotional stability, the emotional health, and the ability to trust, the ability to even decipher relationships. For example, a child needs to know how to trust and to be intimate, right, with their parent, if they're a safe parent, right? But the child also needs to kind of learn how to kind of mistrust / refuse a person who's dangerous. And I think in that parent relationship, they learn both, because the parent gives that safe haven, that relationship to distrust. And again, that's where when you have rules and punishment and manipulation and bribing, all this stuff, that works against that type of foundational relationship. But when you have that, you give them a bearing, you give them a compass of what is a true, intimate, healthy relationship. And then they can use that to refuse and reject unhealthy relationships, right? So it all comes down to that first relationship. The problem is a few things. One is if you corrupt that relationship with with lots of other stuff that's not healthy, and your focus is just on maintaining order and making sure your kids just obey you. And that's, okay, this is another thing. So many parents are focused on this whole obedience-centric model, which I think is can be very destructive to this whole notion of actually emotional intelligence. Obedience-centric parenting, a lot of that is based off of fear. If you think about it, what is so-called obedience? Obey me, or it's obey me or else, right? Obey me or else there's something bad that's going to happen, right? Whatever that bad thing, a punishment, timeout, something you're going to take away, or whatever it is. And I think, when you interparenting with an obedience-centric model, and that's, I think, what most of the parenting models out there, you actually start to put yourself at a disadvantage in teaching your kids emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is a result of a free relationship, a pure relationship without fear, right? You don't want to bring in fear in the relationship. That destroys the ability to feel safe. Think about it. Safety is kind of the foundation of a lot of development. And if you don't feel safe, you're not going to be able to really be able to grow in a lot of ways emotionally. Therefore, parents need to provide this safe environment, this safe relationship. And here's my thing. Don't sabotage everything by bringing in fear and obedience and punishment, all this stuff that practically everyone talks about or everyone goes by with parenting. It's just so destructive. Anyways, I think, emotional intelligence, all that stuff completely is like encapsulated and just, is part of this approach in parenting with first principles. All right, guys. Wanted to thank you for this first episode. We got some awesome questions, and I hope this is going to be a good resource for folks who watch it now, but also later. And we'll see you guys in my next episode. Thanks.